Hello, and welcome to another episode of Movies, They're Pretty Good. I'm your host, Travis Dunning, and I guess this is technically the first episode of TV shows, They're Pretty Good, because today we're talking about Twin Peaks Season 1. This is a TV show, the only successful TV show by David Lynch. He tried a couple other different concepts. I think On the Air was one, and The Hotel Room. I believe that's what it was called. I've seen the hotel one, and one of the episodes is really good. I haven't seen On the Air yet, but I'll try to track that one down at some point. But just as the completionist that I am, yeah, Twin Peaks is what we're talking about today. I got the collection right here. This is the Blu-ray collection. It's got seasons 1 and 2. It's got Fire Walk with Me and The Missing Pieces. It's not quite as comprehensive as the A to Z or Z to A, whichever one it is. But what I like about this one is the setup of it. You got the like cool cover. It's got a bunch of different, like each flap has like a cool different thing and everything. So I like the setup of this box set. I probably will at some point when the price comes down on get the Z to A, just because you can get the pilot episode and episode 8 of The Return on 4K. And if that's the only way we're ever going to get that on 4K, then I want to have that. But I'm kind of also hoping that you just release everything on 4K at some point. This is my favorite TV show of all time. I was a late comer to it, I'll be honest. But it is something that it's at least currently my favorite TV show. I've watched it maybe as I'm watching it for this podcast. I think it'll be my fourth, maybe fifth watch of the entire series. So it's definitely up there. Definitely I've had like a longer time to sit with stuff like Lost, that I was there. I came in the first episode of Lost I saw was the season 1 finale, and from then on I was hooked, like until it ended. Office was similar. I'd be lying if I said I wasn't annoyed with how popular it got with other people. That's fine. Like I'm try very hard not to be one of those people that's just like, oh my god, like I liked it before it was cool or anything like that. I get it. I'm deep down, like, or just overall, I'm glad that people like the things that I like. I think it's just kind of hard sometimes when the thing you've liked for years suddenly becomes oversaturated, and it is everywhere. Like every meme, every person that has been around, and probably like people that were like, oh, you should watch this show. I'm not going to watch that. And then they, now all of a sudden they're into it and listening to Office Ladies and all that stuff. So, and it sounds so like fucking pretentious to be like, oh, I liked it was before it was cool, whatever. I'm not trying to be like that, but I'm also saying like I kind of get that, because it's kind of annoying sometimes when people kind of overdo the thing that you like. But at the same time, more so, I would say I just am happy when people like a thing, even if it's whether it's a thing I like or whether it's a thing I don't like. Just whatever you like it, and it doesn't matter what I think, because I'm just a person, and whatever other person that's going to complain about it, it's like, oh, you're a bandwagoner or whatever. They don't fucking matter either, whatever makes you happy, watch it. And so it is kind of easy for me to feel like this Stolen Valor, Twin Peaks, or David Lynch fan, because I am like fairly new to it. Just within the last few years, I've always been aware of him, and it just didn't really click with me until like a couple years ago. And I talked about it a little bit during the Eraserhead episode, but basically that was like the jumping off point. Like once I saw that and that clicked, then everything kind of fell into place, because I had tried to watch Twin Peaks probably 10 years ago. And I just couldn't get into it. And I also already mentioned that it was probably when I was going through my divorce and everything. So that's probably why my mind was just elsewhere. And I was just like, okay, I can't do this one right now. And that's fine. I probably would have caught on to it a little quicker if I had tried maybe just the next year. If I had tried, then I probably would have been like, oh my God, this is amazing. Because it is amazing. It's such a good show. It's got everything. It's got comedy, it's got drama, it's got mystery, it's got paranormal, it's got weird soap opera acting and everything. It's got amazing acting, amazing storytelling. It's got everything. But I can also see how it could be hard for someone to get into it, especially people of a newer generation. Now, that's why I want to be very careful when I do show this to my kids. Ideally, probably I'll wait till they're old enough to go all the way through, you know? But it is kind of tempting to show them seasons 1 and 2, which are a little more safe because they were on network television in 1990 and 1991. You know, there was only so much you could do on network television back then compared to when you do a theatrical movie and a Showtime limited series. So they're definitely going to hit that age sooner for the first 2 seasons, but I think I kind of go back and forth whether I want to wait till they're able to watch the whole thing. Because the nice thing about them watching the first 2 seasons first is that even though they won't get like 25 years of waiting to tell the return happens before they get the rest of the story, they will have a chunk of time that they have to wait. So that's kind of like my thought process behind that, is that at least they got like a little bit of like years of wondering, but also there's the fucking internet, you know. And I, you know, granted, as a parent, I can control to an extent what media they consume, but at the end of the day, they're kids with the internet, and I was a kid with the internet, and look at all the shit that I saw. So, you know, I think they have it way better than I did, because the internet was fairly new when I got full access to the internet. And so, you know, my generation's parents didn't immediately know what all was there. So, you know, we saw a lot of things that we probably shouldn't have seen. And, you know, whether that made us, you know, made it harder for us or made it better for us, who's to say? You know, we'll find out someday. You know, there's the psychological studies haven't been fully completed yet. But anyways, Twin Peaks, amazing show. But today we're just going to talk about season 1. I'm going to try to not spoil too much in the coming episodes. I will spoil everything from season 1. I'm very upfront about the fact that I would prefer that people consume this media before they listen to the episode. If they don't, that's up to you. You know, there's people that like they want the spoilers, you know, and that's fine. Like, to me, that's crazy, but that's just the way that my mind works. Like, I don't want the spoilers. But you know, but I'm not going to spoil anything past season 1. I'm going to try not to, at least. But yeah, let's get into it. Twin Peaks, like I said, I think I said, aired on ABC, started in 1990. Looks like the first episode was April 8th, 1990. And from what I've heard and read and everything, it was a pretty major success. Like, it took the world by storm, and it's kind of like fitting that I used Lost as a example of a TV show that I love, because that's what it was like for me in growing up in the 2000s. I was high school age when Lost came out, and it was just like everywhere. You know, there was a bunch of people at school that were watching it. They were talking about it on the radio when you would get in the car in the morning, and like everything. And I'm pretty sure the first podcast I ever listened to was the Lost podcast with Damon Lindelof and Carlton Cuse. I don't think they did it every single episode. It wasn't so much a watch along, but it was like the first, you know, that's just like what 25% of all podcasts right now, or just like rewatch, or I mean, even this to an extent is just a, you watch the movie, you listen to the episode. If you watch a movie and you're like, man, I didn't fucking get that, or like, or like, I don't know if I liked that. What do other people think about it? You get on your podcast app, you put the title of the movie in, and you're going to come up with episodes. Maybe this podcast, maybe not. I'm this isn't the first one I'm going to go to, but whatever podcast or media person you trust, and you see that they did an episode on this movie that you're like, man, like what do other people think about that? And then you go and listen to it, and now those are so commonplace, these TV show ones, where it's like, oh my God, like, what did I just see? What are other people saying about this? Like, what did that mean? And especially with something like Lost or Twin Peaks that are so, paranormal, sci-fi adjacent and mystery bound and all this stuff, you want to know, like, man, what was going on there, But yeah, I do remember like the way that show took hold of, like, it took hold of the nation. That sounds so like cliche and like commonplace to say and like dumb, but it really did, and I obviously not everybody watched it, but enough people were watching it to where there was a good chance that after an episode aired, you would go to school, work, whatever the next day, and someone was going to be talking about it. Not everyone was going to be talking about it, but at some point during the day, you would hear someone talking about, the Hatch or some shit, and you would go like, oh, like, I watched it too. Like, what do you think? And then you get into this big conversation, the term water cooler talk or anything like that, that was around for a reason. And it's so rare that we get a show that's like that now in this streaming age. And that's very unfortunate to me. I like that we have access to stuff like after it's aired, and you don't have to have like appointment television. You can live your life, and then when you get to it, you get to it. It's kind of like it's very much a catch-22, because I like that you have the option to not worry about it. And technically we did back then too, because depending on how old you were, you either had a VCR with blank tapes where you can record the thing because you knew you were going to be gone that night. So you record it and you watch it before you go interact with the rest of the world, because there was no social media. You didn't have to worry about like getting on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, X, and having the thing spoiled, Now, if you went to work or school, then yeah, probably. So you at least had like, okay, like, I know I'm not going to be there tonight, so I'm going to go to this party, wedding, birthday, whatever it is, and then when I get home, I'm going to watch it. And then after the VCR thing, there was TiVo, and then just DVR, and then now they're streaming, But when streaming comes along, it's nice that you can watch it whenever you want, but then when certain shows like the Netflix shows just put a whole season out at a time, it's like, fuck, I gotta watch the whole fucking thing tonight, And then, the biggest one now is going to be Stranger Things, because it's the final season. Everyone knows it. We've waited, how many fucking years for this next one to come out? And they're putting it out in 3 chunks, and each chunk is a holiday. So you basically gotta like, all right, am I gonna spend time with my family, or we're gonna watch this show that might get spoiled if I log on to social media, tonight. So, it sucks, but I also, it's kind of nice sometimes to be able to binge the thing, but it's just so different. And I like innovation to an extent, but I do kind of miss having the like appointment television. And that even still works in the streaming era, because White Lotus was one that's the most recent example I can think of. and there's probably other ones too, but a most recent example that I personally was like, I have to watch it on Sunday night before I, before I get on my phone to look at social media, before I go to school, before I go to work, whatever. Like White Lotus was like, all right, I gotta do this. And it's very refreshing to still have something like that. Whether you're talking with your friends, with your family, or just to know for yourself, it's nice to have a thing to look forward to. And it's kind of hard when these shows have such a long gap in between seasons. It's very easy to fall off. Because if I'm being honest, if this wasn't going to be the last season of Stranger Things, I probably wouldn't care all that much. I wouldn't be like going out of my way to make sure I watched it, And even then, if something more important comes up, I'm going to, prioritize that other thing, obviously. But, yeah, I don't know. That was probably like way too long of a tangent, but just to say that Twin Peaks was the early 90s version of all of that. It was, people were talking about it. People loved it. Everyone was wondering, who killed Laura Palmer, all that stuff. And it's not the first time that that's happened. There was the whole like who shot JR on Dallas. Stuff like this has happened before. But this was just that, that time period's mass viewing that, everyone shared. So yeah, let's get into it. So Twin Peaks, it's about a small town in Washington. It says that it's I think it's supposedly supposed to take place kind of more on my side of Washington, because I'm right on the eastern border. I'm right on the Idaho border. So they kind of make it seem like it is taking place somewhere up north from where I'm at, because it's like close to the Idaho border, but close to the Canada border. Where it was filmed was out near Seattle. Something crazy that I just found out recently. So I am going to school and working here in Washington State, but I'm on the east side, going to Washington State University, whatever. I work in a veteran office, and so I'm there with like other veterans or ROTC people, National Guard, or dependents of military people. But, it's people from all over the state of Washington, which is where this was filmed and takes place. I, at some point, brought up the show Twin Peaks and having a separate conversation with one of my coworkers and friends. And then someone else, one of my other coworkers, chimes in, and he's like, "You talking Twin Peaks?" And I was like, "Yeah, the TV show from the early 90s. Like, yeah, like my grandma lived in one of the houses from that show." I was like, "Whoa, wait, no shit?" And he's like, "Yeah." I was like, "Well, which house?" And he's like, "Laura Palmer's house." I was like, "What the fuck? Are you fucking kidding me?" He's like, "Yeah, like, like we, she lived in that house. Like, my mom's childhood bedroom was Laura Palmer's bedroom, and they would get people knocking on the door saying, 'Hey, we want to, like, can we just look inside real quick?' Or like that." It's insane. It's such a small world, and it really is like people with a military background, you'll run into this all the time. And there's other small worlds too, but in my experience, being someone that was in the military, there's a chance that you're going to run into somebody that either like that knows someone that like you're going to run into a lot of mutuals, and it's really weird. But this was something that I wasn't really expecting. It kind of makes sense because, I'm in Washington State, and so many of these students are coming from the west side where Seattle is, where it was filmed and everything like that. Oh, now I remember. So the other guy was saying that, he was going to go do this event over in like Snoqualmie area. And I was like, I think that's where Twin Peaks was filmed. And that's when the other guy's like, Twin Peaks? And then, he shared that information. So that was crazy. Like, I wasn't expecting that. That's super awesome. Like, really tried hard to keep it together, finding that out. It's like, oh yeah, I'm not one of those weird guys. And really, I was really like, like, oh, what was it like? But she's not his grandma that owned the house is not the owner that is featured in The Return. Because there is a part in The Return where the real owner of that house is in the episode, but that she sold it before that. So just the owner before that one that's in the show, that's my coworker's grandma. But yeah, crazy shit. But yeah, so it's taken place. It's supposed to take place in northeast Washington State, kind of in between the Idaho and Canada border. Because it's a made up town. There is I think there is Twin Peaks, there are two peaks somewhere in Washington. But like I said, the only time I lived on that side, I was 4 when I left. My little brother, previous guest on the podcast, Tyler, was born in Bremerton, but I barely remember that side of Washington. I know it was pretty. That's, when I think back, because, I was 4 when we left. I just remember very green, and I remember looking across the water at the city, which I'm pretty sure was Seattle. And just a few visions of the house and stuff like that. Nothing crazy. But that's, to say I'm not so familiar with the geography of the entire state. I know that there are mountains that are considered the Twin Peaks. That's about it, I'm more familiar with the eastern side, and even then I'm kind of like, all right, where do I live and where's civilization? Spokane. Okay. So it is always fun when they in the show name drop a town that I recognize, a town name. I'm like, oh yeah, I know. Yeah, that's real, what in I think it's the last episode of season 1 when they're undercover at One-Eyed Jack's. They say that whoever the fake persona that Big Ed is playing is from Tri-Cities. And I just drove through Tri-Cities 2 days ago because I was at a wedding in Southern Oregon, and to get up to here I had to go through Tri-Cities. So it is just, I don't know, I'm just a weird geography nerd sometimes. Not to where I know as much as I should, but I'm just like, oh, I've heard of that place, or I've been that place, and I always get excited when I hear those names of places I've been and stuff, even if it's very minor, or I just drove through there and got gas, But yeah, getting into the story a little bit, like I said, takes place in a small town of Twin Peaks in Washington State. I think it's also supposed to be taking place in the time period that it's filmed. So it's supposed to be in 1990. I think. I could be wrong on that, but I'm pretty sure. So it starts out with you see a guy. He's getting ready for the day. He's going to go out fishing. He tells his wife that he's going out. They have an awkward interaction. The guy, the fisherman, played by Jack Nance from Eraserhead, his character's name is Pete Martell. His wife is Catherine Martell, played by Piper Laurie. She's the mom from Carrie. I know she's been in other stuff too, but that's the role I know her from. Or at least recognize her pretty quickly from. They're also living with Josie Packard, played by Joan Chen. She is the sister-in-law of Catherine Martell. So she was married to Catherine's brother, and he died in some boating accident. And we'll really get more into that in season 2. But so yeah, we see Pete. He's getting ready to go fishing. He's heading out. He has the awkward conversation with awkward interaction with Catherine. Kisses her goodbye. Goes out onto the lake to go fishing. He's heading out there, and he notices something on the shore, and it's a plastic bag. So he's like, that's not supposed to be there, and goes and checks it out, and it is a dead body. We see him calling the sheriff's office. I believe the phone is answered by Lucy, who's the receptionist at the sheriff's office. Pete says, like, get Sheriff Truman on the phone. Sheriff Truman, played by Michael Ontkeen. Then he picks up the phone and he's like, it's Pete. Like, she's dead, wrapped in plastic. And, very interesting line read. I've heard that from people that were around, when this aired initially, that because of how weird that phone conversation was, a lot of people believed Pete might have like kind of had something to do with it. More on that later, or I guess more on that in season 2 when they do reveal who the killer is. But so he calls it in, says dead body wrapped in plastic. Get down here. He gets down there. It's him, Andy, which is the deputy, and Dr. Hayward, played by Warren Frost, who is Mark Frost, the other showrunner's dad. So it's the three of them and Pete, obviously, because he's the one that found the body. And Andy's taking crime scene photos, and he's starting to get upset. So this is where we kind of a little bit get a glimpse into like what kind of person Andy is. He's a very sensitive guy, a little goofy, a little clumsy, a little off, but all around a good guy, very empathetic, all this stuff. He's taking crime scene photos. He's starting to get upset. And this is also kind of indicates to us that this is a very small town where stuff like this just does not happen, at least as far as the normal population is concerned. Very Blue Velvet-esque, but less so, because in Blue Velvet is kind of like half and half, and it's like we know that this other side of the tracks has bad stuff going on because the aunt warns Jeffrey, like, hey, like don't go to Lincoln Street. So there's at least some awareness that there is something bad going on. But in Twin Peaks, it's like really under the surface. Like, it is very like nothing bad happens here. We're a small town and everyone knows each other, and everything's great. At least they put that facade up. So murders don't happen. None of this stuff happens. So Andy's crying. Sheriff Truman's like, is this going to be like this every time? And, Andy's like, I'm sorry, and then they're like, all right, after he took the pictures of how the crime scene was when they arrived, then, okay, now it's time to open the plastic and see who it is. And everyone immediately recognizes her. It's like, it's Laura Palmer. We will find out that Dr. Hayward is the father of Donna Hayward, who is Laura's best friend. So immediate connection there. I think of all the people in that scene, he has the closest connection to Laura. And this is what kicks off the whole story, kicks off everything, is the death of Laura Palmer and who killed her and everything. Because this is what's going to bring in Special Agent Cooper, played by Kyle MacLachlan, David Lynch mainstay, and basically the main character. But there's also a lot of main characters. I don't think anyone really gets sidelined all that much. For the most part, every young person is pretty much a main character, but I don't know. Everyone's kind of a main character in this. I think this is why I kind of bring up Lost so much, is because there's just such a big cast of main characters. I guess another one that you could compare it to is Game of Thrones. But I think Lost isn't the easier one because it is just so mystery driven. And there's a little bit of a supernatural element. But anyways, so We then at some point see I'm more so gonna focus on this first episode plot wise, I think, just because it establishes the story so much. I like the introduction of each character. So I think that's why I kind of want to focus on this one. And then I'll kind of just like hit the story beats as the ones that I think are important kind of pop up in my head. But I want to at least establish every main character that shows up in that first episode. Just that way we know going forward. We see Laura's mom calling her like down for breakfast, like Laura, like it's time to go, like, all that stuff, and not getting any answer. So she goes upstairs, checks the bathroom, checks the bedroom, nothing. So then she goes downstairs, she realizes her daughter's not there. So she calls, I believe she calls Donna's mom first. So calls there and it's like, hey, is Laura there? And she's like, no, she's not here. Maybe she's with Bobby. Bobby's her boyfriend. So she calls Bobby's mom, played by Charlotte Stewart, who was the wife Mary in Eraserhead. Calls her, says, hey, is Laura there? Or have you seen her? Have you seen Bobby? And she's like, well, Bobby left like a while ago and I didn't see her, but maybe they are together. Maybe he went and picked her up early and they're just hanging out. And Laura's mom is like, yeah, kind of like half believing that, but also like, I think something's wrong. So she's definitely starting to worry at this point. So then she calls her husband, Leland Palmer, played by Ray Wise, and as she's talking to him, and he's kind of like, "Oh, I bet, I bet she's with Bobby, or I bet, this, I bet it's not a big deal." As they're having that conversation, Leland says, Sheriff Truman, so he sees Sheriff Truman coming in, and I think at this point is when the mom is like, that I know what's going on here. And well, she's like, Leland, like, what is he there for? Like, what is he saying? And but she knows, she knows what she's been fearing. Basically her worst fears are coming alive right now. She knows that if the sheriff is there looking for Leland Palmer and that her daughter's missing, that, it's not good. Best case scenario, and it sounds even insane to be like best case scenario, she did something bad and got arrested. Medium case scenario, she's kidnapped but still alive, and worst case scenario, which is what it is, she's dead. So yeah, that she's breaking down on the phone and he's breaking down there in the lobby because he's working at he's at a hotel. He's at the Great Northern Lodge is where he works, but he doesn't work for the hotel. He works for the hotel owner, which is Benjamin Horne. So he is the lawyer of Benjamin Horne. Benjamin Horne, played by Richard Beymer from West Side Story, is the owner of the hotel and kind of owner of half the town. He's kind of the rich guy that has his foot in everything, basically. And the other person who has their foot in everything is Catherine Martell, Pete's wife from earlier, Piper Laurie. And, we'll get more into that in a little bit. But, so yeah, they're breaking down. They're upset, obviously. Then we see, I believe, then we go to see what Bobby's doing. We might have got to see this first. But, it doesn't really matter. So Bobby, who is Laura's boyfriend, he is at the Double R Diner. He's flirting with the waitress, Shelly Johnson, played by Madchen Amick. So he's there at the diner. He's flirting with her. We also see the owner of the diner, Norma Jennings, played by Peggy Lipton, which I think, not until this last watch, like the first time I rewatched it after David Lynch died. It was only until then that I realized that Peggy Lipton, it was Quincy Jones's wife and Rashida Jones's mom. I had no idea, but like small world. We're talking earlier about small worlds like that. Whatever. But I'm not surprised. They're both beautiful. But yeah, she's the owner of the diner. And I know she had like a lot of the parent age actors in Twin Peaks were kind of big stars when they were younger. So like I said, like Richard Beymer was in West Side Story. Peggy Lipton was in the Mod Squad. Piper Laurie, I forget what she was in, but I know she was like a big person when she was younger as well. I know what I know her from is just a couple years before this. A little over a decade before this. But that's kind of David Lynch's thing, is to kind of combine the old with the new. Kind of like how we're seeing a lot of these, like, I don't know, it might sound weird to call some of these guys auteur directors, but a lot of these, like, not the mainstream, but not fully too artsy directors, like kind of medium auteur. And it, it depends on who you ask. They're my favorites, but I'm not gonna, kind of defend them as being like better than Ingmar Bergman or, Akira Kurosawa or anything like that. But so like Tarantino, Paul Thomas Anderson, Wes Anderson have been using a lot of these, Nepo babies and stuff like that. And David Lynch was doing that too, like I said, Warren Frost is Mark Frost's dad, and Laura Dern, Bruce Dern's daughter, and then when we get into Wild at Heart, her mom's in that one. So, but he kind of has always had this fascination with kind of using the old and the new, and like a lot of these newer guys do. But yeah, anyways, I got way off track. So Bobby's at the diner, he's flirting with the waitress. They leave together, like, oh, I'm gonna give her a ride home, that type of thing. Kind of just pretending that they're just friends, but everyone kind of sees through it. And so he takes her home. They're making out in the car. They get to her home, realize that her husband, Leo Johnson, is home. He's a trucker. So he's gone for a good amount of time, and then he's back, and then we'll later find out that he's an abusive asshole. But that kind of establishes, like, okay, here's Laura's boyfriend. She's off cheating, or he's off cheating, and we will later find out that she was also cheating and more, way more. But, so then at another point, we get to the school where, because she's a high school student, I think probably a senior. So we get to the school, and there is, I believe, first we see someone talking to the teacher, and then the teacher comes in upset. And then we see Donna Hayward, played by Laura Flynn Boyle. She sees the upset teacher and the empty desk where Laura's supposed to be sitting. And she puts it together because she's already, she's Laura's best friend. She knows that she was in some kind of trouble, but didn't really know the extent of it. Or at least as far as we know right now in season 1. But yeah, I'm even then, even with what we learn later in Fire Walk with Me, which is kind of a prequel to all of Twin Peaks. We do learn that she learns more about what Laura's got going on, but also because of being under the influence, doesn't really grasp it or remember it, So, but yeah, she knows enough to know that she was in trouble. And so it's not hard for her to put together that something bad happened to her because the teacher's upset and the desk is empty. She looks over at James Hurley, played by James Marshall, and they both know, because they were Laura's friends, and they both know something bad happened. So when I think even before the teacher can get the announcement out, like, she's already crying, obviously. Now it's the weird thing about Twin Peaks is this this is a very emotional scene, and it isn't done in a way that really discredits its emotionalness, but the more you rewatch it, and even sometimes the first time you're watching it, it is like it is so soapy that it is kind of easy to laugh at some of this. It's kind of like, I don't know, I kind of go back and forth every single time. Like, the first time I'm like, this is kind of over the top, the acting style and everything. And then you watch it the next time with the context of everything that's going to come, and then you feel the weight of it, and you're like, oh my gosh, this is so heartbreaking because you know what's coming. And then you watch it again just because you're like used to everything, and then it's funny again for some reason. I don't know, because it's so tonally different. Yeah, because I'll talk about it more in the season 2 episodes, but there's a part with a song that makes me laugh and cringe when it's in season 2. And then the same song is sung by the same character in The Return, and I'm crying my eyes out. And I can't tell you, it's not like he got better at singing it, but I don't know. I don't know what it is, but there's something about it, and it is very, like, maybe it's just the 90s-ness of it that is just so weird, and it's not like I have no familiarity with soap operas of this era, because my mom was watching Days of Our Lives. Like, I remember that as long as I can remember, She doesn't watch it now, really. Every once in a while, she'll check in on it just to see how ridiculous it got. But for most of my childhood, she was watching that show. So I was used to the soap opera stuff and everything like that. None of that really caught me off guard. I get what there is to like about it. I get what there is to laugh about it. And I get why David Lynch and Mark Frost would use that style with this type of story, because there's something to it. And whether it is just to comment on the Americana of everything, but that's just how David Lynch is. David Lynch is the sincerity of a soap opera, and a lot of people have said something similar to this, but yeah, I think Mel Brooks referred to him as Jimmy Stewart, that type of person, but he's real, and there's no irony to it. He just is that local boy or that Midwesterner or whatever it is, he just is that. So it's in the hands of anyone else, this might be way more tongue in cheek. But because it is David Lynch, and the more you know about David Lynch and just what kind of person he was, or just have seen his entire body of work, that's just who he was. He was the simplicity of small town life. He was the dorkiness of soap opera stuff, all of that was just real and it was genuine. And I think that's the only way that this works. Because I mean, it's hard to say, because I have seen people pull off tongue in cheek, bad on purpose. It can be pulled off, but if it does, and it is tongue in cheek, it doesn't have the impact that Twin Peaks does, in my opinion. But yeah. So yeah, what was I saying? So they find out at the school. Bobby eventually shows up late to school and then immediately gets pulled aside to get questioned by the sheriff and some deputies. I think this is the first time we see Deputy Hawk, and he's the Native American sheriff deputy. Has I mean, kind of want to say he has a bigger role in the return, but he doesn't ever have a small role, I think he just has more authority in the return versus now, but everyone does, because everyone has seniority because it's 25 years later. But yeah, they obviously he's an initial suspect and they got to question him. He doesn't even know, like, until towards the end of him getting questioned, that Laura's even dead. So everyone at school knows. The only other two high schoolers that are really important to the story, Mike, who is Donna's boyfriend and best friend of Bobby, both football players, I believe. Mike's a football player for sure. It's kind of hard to know what any of these kids do at high school because they're barely ever, like, I'm pretty sure this might be the only scene with them actually at high school. But yeah, so for sure Mike is a football player because he's always wearing like a Letterman jacket. Bobby might just be the friend, but he is like a cool guy. He fits in with the jocks even if he's not a jock. So there's Mike, and then the other high school person that is important to the story would be Audrey Horne. So she is Ben Horne, the rich guy that owns the hotel and most of the town. That's his daughter. She's played by Sherilyn Fenn, and she kind of has a bigger role later on, not so much in the first episode or the pilot. But she is a character I really like. I'm really glad that they changed her hairstyle after the pilot. But she's just like she's a hard one to get a read on. She might be the most like David Lynch-ish character because she's like, I don't know, aloof enough, but also so 50s Americana, but so modern at the same time, So yeah, that covers all of the high school people, I believe. So now I'm kind of just going to go down the list of the other cast and kind of just talk about who each person is and like how they get introduced in the pilot. And then I'll kind of, after every character's introduced, then I'll kind of move through the story a little bit. I'm not going to go too in depth, I kind of want to keep a certain length, but I kind of want to, honestly, if I go too long, then I'll split this up into multiple episodes. But as of now, I'd like to keep season 1 as one episode. So Kyle MacLachlan is Special Agent Dale Cooper. He is the FBI agent that has been sent to investigate this murder of Laura Palmer. He is a little different I'd say he's a little more dickish in the pilot episode, and then is just kind of like a goofy, but still serious, but a little more goofy afterwards, and way more likable after the pilot, but like I said, Kyle MacLachlan, great role, perfect role. You got Everett McGill plays Big Ed Hurley. He is James's uncle, who James lives with. And he also runs the gas station, and he's also having an affair with Norma, who runs the Double R Diner. He is married to Nadine, who has an eye patch and is a little off. You know, she's a little eccentric. For most of season one, she is trying to figure out a way to invent silent drape runners, and that is what her obsession is. And she's just she's a little goofy, and a little much. And you find out that he and her and Norma and Norma's husband, who is in prison at least during the pilot, were all in high school together. You know, probably the same grade. I believe Ed and Norma were together during high school, but at some point something went wrong, and Norma ended up marrying her husband, Hank, and Ed ended up marrying Nadine. I think Nadine was a little more of the like nerdy girl, but yeah. So that's that dynamic. You know, there's an affair where one spouse is just crazy and weird, and the other spouse is in prison. I already talked about Lucy. She's the receptionist. She's got something going on with Andy, the deputy that was crying during the crime scene photos. So there's some sort of dynamic there with the two of them. There's Deputy Hawk, played by Michael Horse. Like I said, he's the Native American sheriff's deputy. He kind of brings in a lot of the lore of the area into the story. Great character, and like I said, a little bit of a bigger arc in The Return. You got the psychologist or psychiatrist, I forget which one, Dr. Jacoby. He's played by Russ Tamblyn, also from West Side Story. He's got like almost like 3D glasses, like in terms of color, because it's like the red and blue lenses. And like eventually you see his apartment, and it's all like tiki themed, which, you know, you can't tell by the shirt, you know, right up my alley. Not that I like to think I'm not as weird as him, but you know, whatever. But yeah, he's an interesting character. A little, you know, gets bigger as the story goes on. Not so much in the pilot episode. You got Major Briggs. I don't know if he was in the pilot actually, but that's Bobby's dad. Then Catherine Coulson, talked about her in the Eraserhead episode, even though she wasn't in the movie. You know, her scene got cut out, but that was Jack Nance's wife. She worked on the movie Eraserhead, and she is in this as the log lady. Her introduction is hilarious, and I think that is, like, for me, the like line that indicates to the audience, like, hey, some of this is funny on purpose. It's not like so bad it's good. Like, we know that some of this is silly, because they're at like a town hall, and Agent Cooper says to Sheriff Truman, when, you know, they're just looking through the audience at different people, he's trying to get a read on the town and the townspeople and the different like prominent members. He asks about Josie. He asks about a few like different people. And then he looks over, and there is a woman with glasses holding a log. And as like, Dale just says, "Who's the lady with the log?" And Sheriff Truman says, "Oh, we call her the log lady." And it's just so like, oh yeah, duh. You know, the lady with the log is the log lady. Me saying that isn't going to do it any justice. Like, the comedic timing of the moment is so perfect. It just makes me laugh every single time. Then we got Mary Jo Deschanel, which is Zoe Deschanel's mom, is Eileen Hayward. That's Donna's mom, and the Dr. Hayward's wife, obviously. And she is wheelchair bound in the show. You know, I don't think she's like actually wheelchair bound in real life. But she's not, She doesn't show up a lot. Um, she I think she has a bigger story arc in season 2. I mean, I know she does, but she doesn't show up much during season 1. Um, but that the nice thing about the show is like even if you don't have a major plot point, like you're still showing up, throughout. David Lynch doesn't forget about you. He's only going to use you when he needs you for the story. And then another, that's the thing is like I wish I would have wrote this down, but I'm not gonna. I don't think I'll forget anything that's too important, but I might just get it a little out of order. Another important character would be Jerry Horn, which is Ben Horn's brother. Now he is played by David Patrick Kelly, who I recently realized, and this another thing that took a couple watches into the series to realize that he is the guy from the Warriors who has the like Coke bottles, the glass bottles on his fingers, and his Warriors come out to play. That's him. So, and he's always kind of like a Weasley character, I would say. He's a little more. He's a rich guy in this one, but he's still kind of a similar personality every single time, at least in the stuff I've seen him in. And then Miguel Ferrer, he plays Agent Albert Rosenfeld. So he's another FBI agent. He comes in to help with the investigation, but he's a little more like, doesn't want shit from these like small town folks and kind of looks down on them and everything. And he's just like, by the book and let's get this done and everything. And kind of a little forgetful of like, hey, this is a small town where this shit does not happen. So this is new to them and this is like a lot for them. So he's a little like, he kind of needs like a little bit of a wake up call, but at the same time, he's just like, I'm just trying to do my job, that type of thing. But yeah, he's a great character, and he's throughout the whole series, the movie and the return. But yeah, so at a certain point, obviously Bobby Briggs is on their radar as a suspect. They let him go after questioning him, and then eventually they are questioning Donna because that's the best friend. They're watching a movie. They find a videotape, I believe, of that Laura had, and it's her and Donna on the tape, but obviously someone's filming it, and they're trying to find out like, hey, who filmed this? And Donna's hiding something. You can tell, and they can tell that she's hiding something and doesn't want to really say who filmed, and says that it was like, oh, it's just some hiker, and we asked her if she could film. But Dale sees the reflection in Laura's eyeball of a motorcycle, and is like, all right, whoever was filming it has a motorcycle, so let's look at all the motorcycle riders. Think eventually. Oh wait, not quite yet. So, after everyone's questioned, at a certain point, Donna sneaks out of her house to go with James to talk. So, because they're like a secret group of friends. I think like the fact that they were friends with James was like hidden because James is kind of a loner, I guess. And so she sneaks off with him because they need to talk about stuff, and end up going to the Roadhouse, I believe. Bobby and Mike show up and see them together. And I think at a certain point, oh yeah, that's what it is. So Bobby is shown the same video when he's being interrogated. And so he knows that Laura was seeing somebody else, and he is smart enough to figure out like it was James Hurley because of the motorcycle thing. Or I think, and also the something about in her diary, nervous about seeing Jay tonight, and they're trying to figure out who Jay is throughout the season. And there's a few Jays. I think who she means, who she's talking about in that instance, is Leo Johnson, but she is seeing James. And we will eventually find out that even though she is like having this little fling with James, she does just like kind of think he's just stupid, and he's too naive for her and all this other stuff, and that's kind of like an emotional part for him. And he's just like, I'm glad I heard it, now I don't have to go the whole my whole life like wondering like all this stuff. But I believe the J she's referring to is Leo Johnson, and they do kind of allude to that towards the end of season 1. I know, yeah. But that's not what Bobby's thinking. So Bobby's like, it's this James guy. Like, I knew this guy was a problem. Let's go kick his ass. Because, even though he's cheating on Laura, whatever male fragility, he's got to like go prove himself or whatever the fuck. So they're at the Roadhouse. James and Donna are at the Roadhouse. It's a fair city at the Roadhouse because Big Ed and Norma are there too. And eventually a fight breaks out between Bobby tries to attack James. Big Ed intervenes and he gets punched. All this stuff. And then eventually Bobby and Mike get arrested because they were the instigators of the fight. And I believe James gets arrested too. But I forget what the charge is. I think just because he's now a suspect. And they didn't really think about him as a suspect before, but the fact that he was there and that Bobby attacked him and that he has a motorcycle. All that stuff was like, okay, we at least need to talk to you. So they bring him in and he was involved in the fight. So, and the weirdest fucking shit like ever, like, is when they're in the, like, Bobby and Mike are in a cell and James is in a cell. And when James gets brought in, they're like trying to intimidate him and just start barking like dogs. And oh, okay. I don't know. Like that's one thing I never understand, like I'm someone who's very like comfortable in my manliness, like in to where it's like I know I'm a man, and I'm not trying to be like, oh, I was born a man, so but I know, because I've always felt that way. I've always felt like a man, so I am a man. But I know I don't need to do all these other things to prove that. I've never like felt the need to be tough or, aggro or any of this shit. And I've never identified with people that are like that, because to me that's always just like you either you're overcompensating and there's something else going on, and it's like, oh, being me man, me straight, me like women, that's the case sometimes, and then those guys turn out being gay, that's one case. And then just there's so many, there's a wide spectrum of overcompensating for your manlyhood and what that means, and there's no one answer for it. And I've just never felt the need to be like that. And I've always felt that those people are kind of annoying to me. And you really see that in a college environment too. Yeah, it's just even in 2025, you're still going to see that shit. And I've just never understood it. And if that's who you really are, great, whatever, congrats. I just don't feel the need to do that, because what do I gotta prove? I know who I am, and so I'm just gonna be myself. And then if someone likes that, then we're friends or whatever. And if not, then I don't want to be your friend, So, but that's what's so funny about this scene is like those people exist. Like I've met those people, I've talked to those people, I've avoided those people, and then they're just like, yeah, like we're so manly, we're gonna bark like dogs at you. Like we're all in fucking jail, we're all in the same playing field, what, like what are you really proving there, But and it's also just so fucking funny to be like, it's like, oh, like you stole my girlfriend from me, but I was also cheating on her. I don't know. I've never understood that, but it's so fucking common. You hear about it all the time. You see it all the time. You experience it all the time. But I don't know. It's just so weird. But that's why it works in this, because it's real. That those people are like that. David Lynch probably dealt with people like that when he went to college in Philadelphia. Or just in his everyday life when he was in high school, or in his adult life. There's probably actors and writers and other people like that. Even in places like film school, you're gonna run into people like that. But so that, I think that for the most part that covers episode 1. I know that the European pilot, where they kind of edited it. Oh my gosh, edited it so that it had like kind of a wrap it up ending and could be shown as a movie. Now they kind of it's a weird one, the European pilot, because it only kind of contradicts future stuff that comes up after the pilot. But it does, like, it is just, it's weird because they do reuse some of those scenes later when Dale Cooper has his first dream. And the dreams are very important to the series of Twin Peaks. But eventually, like, you're going to find out about Bob. And Bob is a stringy haired, like, grungy looking dude. Long hair, denim jacket, like that kind of guy. And I'll get to the backstory about that in a little bit. So in the European pilot that kind of, makes it just one movie, they're like, oh, I know who did it, and it was this guy Bob, and let's go get him. And then they're in some, like, boiler room type deal, and he's there, and he's saying all this stuff, and there's Mike with the one arm, and like all this different stuff, and a lot of that does get brought into later episodes and everything. And I didn't rewatch the that version of it this time, so I'm a little rusty on the details. But when I was watching through the season after having seen that version of it before, I was able to recognize a couple of the scenes. So later when Dale does have the dream, you see Bob and Mike like kind of monologuing, and it is a lot of the same lore that is brought up in that. But there is kind of like a definitive, like, oh, we got him, that type of thing that happens in that European version, which I know was like distributed on Laserdisc, which I would love to get that Laserdisc. But I mean, I have it on the Blu-ray, and I'm pretty sure it's in the Z to A collection too. But yeah, eventually everyone gets released from jail. Everyone cooperates to an extent. Dale knows to kind of keep an eye on whatever Bobby and Mike are gonna do, and kind of warns them like, hey, like, if you're fucking around, I'm gonna know what's up, or like, you better leave James alone, because if something does happen to him, I know it's gonna be you. So everyone gets let go at some point. Dale goes and stays at the Great Northern. He gets a room there. Eventually they do the autopsy on Laura. I think this is when Miguel Ferrer comes in, because he comes and does the autopsy via the FBI. This is where he kind of runs into problems with the locals and stuff, because he wants to do a thorough autopsy, and they're like, well, we got to have the funeral, and so this obviously causes some problems. Dale's there to kind of be like, hey, like, let's meet in the middle. Like, this, they need to have the funeral because shit like this does not happen in a small town like this, but you obviously got to do your job too, so you have till the end of the day, that type of thing. we also find out that oh yeah, I think it's not till episode 3 that Ben's brother Jerry shows up, I believe. Because once he does show up, then they go to One Eyed Jack's, which is across the Canadian border. It is a basically a brothel slash casino in on the Canadian side of the border, and Ben's the owner, and they're going to check out the new girl to have sex with her or whatever. Then they flip a coin to do it, which I'm like, all right, I don't know. That's not. I don't want sloppy seconds like right after my brother, or anyone that I know personally. But I'm also not the type of guy to go, visit a brothel either. So, but it's it that's just how it is. There's people that are like that, and I'm just not like that. Um, Eventually, it is the end of the third episode where Dale has his first dream, and this is where the first time we see the Black Lodge. And like I said earlier, there's the monologues from Bob and Mike, the one-armed man, and Mike says that he would kill, but he ended up cutting off his right arm to stop himself from killing. Eventually, I don't think it's here, but there is a little person in the dream in the red room, which we will later learn is the Black Lodge, is what it's referred to as. So he's there. It's like a chevron pattern on the floor. There's red curtains. There's black armchairs. There's a statue. Just aesthetic out the wazoo, and and there's a woman there that is, looks like Laura Palmer. The little man says that she is my cousin. Doesn't she look like Laura Palmer? Everyone is talking backwards. Well, so the voices sound weird. It is like you can understand the words, but it sounds weird. So the way that they did it was they phonetically spoke it backwards and then played it in reverse. And so the words are in the correct direction, I guess, but it just sounds eerie. It sounds like Uncanny Valley and everything, which is something that the actor that plays the little person, I mean, he is a little person. I'm not trying to use the word that they used back then, but Michael J. Anderson used to do that for fun, like kind of like his own like pig Latin type deal when he was younger. So he learned how to speak backwards. So, it came naturally to him, but everyone else had to kind of learn it too. But it sounds trippy. It works. It's super fun and just like, puts you out of your comfort zone, and you're not sure why. Because that's the thing with like Uncanny Valley is that it's not the way it's supposed to be, and your brain knows that, so that's what like makes you feel uncomfortable about a certain thing. Whether it's like there's different levels of uncomfortable. If you're into that sort of thing, then you're just like, yeah, I really like this and I don't know why. Or it's like, I'm freaked out by this and I don't know why. It just depends on the type of person you are. But back to the brothel, One Eyed Jack's, because that does play into the story. We will eventually learn that Laura tried to work at One Eyed Jack's. The recruiting process to working at One Eyed Jack's is working at the perfume counter of Horn's department store. So Ben Horn owns a department store. Girls that work at the perfume counter, usually hot women, and the ones that kind of seem like they might want to sleep with dudes for money get recruited to One Eyed Jack's. And Laura tried, worked there one night and got kicked out, and we don't really learn why yet. I don't know if we ever do. I mean, you can kind of fill in the blanks yourself, but there's no like a definitive answer, I would say, at least that I can think of right now. But then they do end up having the funeral. Uh, that ends up being a shit show because Bobby decides to like call everyone out on their bullshit and say like like save your prayers, like she would have laughed at them anyway, we all knew that something was wrong and none of us did anything. And that in that case he is right. And was that the time and place to say it? Who's to say? But also then that's not even the worst thing that happens, because then Leland Palmer, Laura's dad, jumps onto the casket as it's being lowered into the ground, and then the machine malfunctions and it's kind of going up and down. And it's weird because at the end of the episode we see Shelley kind of reenacting it with the napkin holder behind the counter at the diner to these like old guys that are just like laughing their asses off. And it's another one of those like weird scenes that like, yeah, why are people behaving like that? I get it from Shelley's end, because that is something that you're like, if you don't have like a close connection to the person, and I don't know, I can kind of see being like, oh, that was fucking weird when that happened, like you can understand that it's sucks, but I don't know. So eventually it's starting to like really look like Leo Johnson, Shelley's husband, has something to do with this. He's got a criminal history. He's shady as fuck, violent, like all this stuff. It makes sense. Like on paper, and as the viewer, you're definitely like, okay, like something's wrong with this guy. Obviously he's beating his wife, but there's other shit too that kind of indicates that something's up with them. And then another person that they're looking into is Dr. Jacoby, because he's just weird as fuck. Eventually they kind of come to the conclusion that like, yeah, I don't think he had anything to do with this, but he's just, he's just weird. Also at some point, because of the bad interaction with Albert, Miguel Ferrar's character, and the local law enforcement, Gordon Cole, the director of the FBI, has to intervene a little bit, and he kind of maybe he's not the director at this point, but the supervisor, voiced by David Lynch, because we don't see him until season 2. But so Gordon Cole gives a call. We'll later find out that he's kind of hard of hearing, so he's always super loud on the phone or in person. But this is like the David Lynch cameo in season 1. Now, like I said, we will see him in person in season 2. At some point, the investigation leads them to the log lady's cabin, and they talk to her. And the deal with the log lady is that she carries this log around, and the log speaks to her. And now they go and have tea with her, and they kind of question her, like, okay, like, and she says, my log had a vision, and I will tell you what the log said. And so the log kind of gives some details about what happened the night Laura Palmer died. And it's from this conversation that there was a bird present, and there was a cabin, and all these like different things. So eventually I think they get a warrant and go to Leo Johnson's cabin. Or no, not Leo Johnson's cabin. Jacques Renault. And he is he's one of the dealers at One Eye Jack's, and he's also the owner of the Roadhouse, or the bartender at the Roadhouse. But Canadian guy, and he's a part of this whole thing. So at some point they end up at his cabin, and there is a bird there named Waldo. They knew that there was some sort of bird involved in this whole thing. They confiscate the bird and take it to the police station, and they're hoping, because it's a minor bird that will mimic things it's heard, that maybe there's something that they can get from this bird. But the bird's been like kind of malnourished at this point, so they find out like, all right, we just gotta like feed this bird, give it water, get it back to like full health, and then maybe we can get something from this bird, because it's our best shot at this point. So they got Waldo the bird at the police station. They have a tape recorder going, recording when they're not in there. And at the bird gets sniped by Leo. Leo's got a rifle because as soon as he finds out that the bird got taken to the police station, he shows up and shoots the bird. Earlier, at some point, we find out that Leo is kind of the supplier for Bobby and Mike. Bobby and Mike have been dealing drugs at the high school. Leo is their supplier. Leo is working for Ben, I believe. Ben Horn. Maybe not. It's either it's Ben and it's Jacques at the same time. It's kind of mixed. Like there's just so much fucking shady shit going on that it's kind of hard to remember who's running which department of illegal activity. But everyone's involved. So those guys are involved. Now who's the direct supervisor of Leo in terms of dealing drugs from Canada into Twin Peaks High School? I don't know. If I wrote it down, maybe. And if not, it doesn't really fucking matter. You're going to get the same shit out of the story, whether you know that detail or not. But at some point when Leo finds out that they have that bird, then he's got to go take it out. He's also on to the fact that Shelly is cheating on him because he finds cigarettes that are not either of their brand in the ashtray because everyone fucking smokes. So he's like, I smoke this, you smoke this. This is not one of those two, So he's kind of onto that, but he doesn't know that it's Bobby. But he does find out that it's Bobby. I think. Oh yeah, that's the thing. That's how he finds out about Waldo, the bird being at the police station, is that he gets shot by Shelly because she's like, I'm tired of this guy fucking beating me because congrats, that's good on her. So she gets a gun and is like, all right, next time he tries to hit me, I'm gonna shoot him. She does shoot him, but then in a case of soap opera overacting, shoots him and then throws the gun and hides her face in her hands and starts crying in the corner. I'm not saying like I'm gonna be like, shoot someone in cold blood and whether they deserve it or not and be fine, but it is just kind of funny in terms of a TV show to be like, oh come on, but so she shoots him, but he leaves and he's fine. I think he's injured, but he's ultimately fine. So he comes back with a rifle and he's gonna wait for whoever she's cheating on him with and shoot them, and sees that it's Bobby, but then he overhears the conversation that there's this bird that they have at the police station, and maybe it's on the police radio. I don't remember, but at some point he finds this out and he's like, well, fuck this, I gotta get that fucking bird. He does, but they're able to hear the bird on the tape recorder start saying Laura Palmer's name and different things like that. So they're able to be like, all right, this bird was there and is a part of it, and the fact that it got shot through the window definitely confirms that this bird was there. Eventually they realize that they gotta go undercover and get to One-Eyed Jacks because they're tipped off about One-Eyed Jacks via Audrey Horn. She puts a note under Agent Cooper's door because she's got a crush on him. She is, they're kind of flirty a little bit in season 1. She is 18, but ultimately they do move away from that because it is just a little questionable. Even though Dale is just like, he's a little flirty, but also like, hey, you're too young, which good on him, even though they, might have gone a little too far on it, but, ultimately all said and done, their conscience is a little clear on this compared to like other stuff, from the time earlier. But and that is why they introduce another character later, or two other characters later, for each of them to have a more age appropriate love interest in season 2. But so she's got a little bit of a crush on Agent Cooper. She tips him off to the fact that something's going on at One-Eyed Jack's. So they're like, all right, we got to go do this. And we know that Jacques Renault is working there. So they go undercover as business people. It's Dale Cooper and Big Ed. And they're in disguise. And Dale pretends that he's going to be, that he is Leo's supplier. And because Jacques doesn't know who the supplier is, I guess. Oh, the bank. That's what it is. Not the drug supplier. So Jacques supplying the drugs, but Dale, or whoever he's pretending to be, is supplying the money. Something like that, I'm not an expert on drug dealer economics. I'm sorry. But that, from what I can remember off the top of my head after a few drinks today, that's how the organization works. But so that's who Dale's pretending to be. He goes and talks to Jacques, gives him the $1,000 poker chip from One-Eyed Jack's that has a piece missing out of it that he found at Jacques' apartment, or cabin. So, and Jacques like, what am I supposed to do with this? And, Dale's like, oh, does this sound familiar? And he does Waldo's voice saying, Laura, Laura. And then Jacques like about to like get out of there. And he's like, settle down. I'm part of this, that type of thing. And then so he's like, I'm the bank for the whole operation. That's who I am. Leo probably mentioned me. Maybe he didn't, And he's like, I knew that and Jacques like, I knew that there was someone, but I just didn't know who, that type of thing. So like, Dale, just out of curiosity, because he's got, he's wired up, obviously. And also this isn't like a strictly legal thing for the FBI to be doing. So he's just like, kind of like, hey, I'm along for the ride. This is kind of your guys' thing. And even though it's not a jurisdiction for the Twin Peaks Sheriff's Department either, let's just say that this is like a vigilante type deal, or, militia. I don't really know. It kind of seems like they're setting themselves up for failure, even though they get the answers. But in season 2, we'll kind of see why he probably should have gone about this another way, because this is on the Canada side that all of this is happening. So Dale's getting Jacques to talk about this, and he shows the poker chip again. It's got the bite. And he's like, I was interested, like, how did this, like, how this like chunk get taken out of it? So Jacques starts telling the story about, how the piece went missing. And basically he's spilling all the beans that Laura was there at the cabin with him and Leo and Ronette Pulaski. Now, Ronette Pulaski was a girl that was found alive on the train tracks. And it was obvious that she had been through the same type of thing. I think there was evidence that she had also been raped or had sexual intercourse with the same amount of people that Laura had, based on like forensic evidence. And there was ads with both of them in Flesh World magazine, and the circumstances were so similar that it was obvious pretty soon on that they were a part of the same thing, So we're finding out from Jacques that like, oh yeah, both of these girls were here, and so was I, and so was Leo Johnson, and so was Waldo the Bird. There, and then he goes into great detail about Laura being tied up because she liked that, and Leo's doing whatever to her and sticks the chip in her mouth, and and it's like it's pretty fucked up stuff, but Jacques is like saying, it's like, oh man, wasn't it so funny when we raped this, that super fucked up, just to like let you know, like, this guy fucking sucks, and he should fucking die, which he's going to pretty soon, I'm pretty sure. Just kind of like to indicate to Dale and the audience, like, this guy is a major problem. He is part of this whole thing, and whenever he's gone, don't be sad, that type of thing. So Dale kind of plays it off, and it's like, thanks for clearing that up, and then they kind of part ways. Dale signals like, yep, this is the guy, and then him and Big Ed leave. And then he also sets up like a thing with Jacques. It's like, hey, meet me on, back at Twin Peaks at this place at this time, and we're gonna finalize this deal or whatever. Now, in the background of all of this, I mentioned very early on that the other person that owns a portion of the town besides Ben Horne is Catherine Martell. And so she's doing some shady shit along with Ben. They're having an affair together. Josie Packard knows about this and is trying to exploit it. And then Hank, which is Norma's husband, he gets paroled and gets a job at the Double R, and is like, I'm on the straight and narrow and everything. He's not. He's doing back to shady shit again. And so everyone's involved in this thing. And eventually the plan is to lure Catherine to the mill where she works. It was her brother's mill. Josie's technically the owner, but Catherine likes to act like she's the owner. So they're going to lure her to the mill, and Leo is going to set it on fire. Now, amongst all of this, Leo finds out that Shelley is cheating on him. Rightfully so, but he finds this out, and being the psychopath that he is, kidnaps her and takes her to the mill that he's supposed to set on fire and ties her up inside. At some point, so she's tied up there, and she's presumably going to burn to death, because that's the whole thing he's supposed to do. He leaves because he's gonna go kill Bobby, which he tells her. It's like, you did this to me, and I'm gonna go kill Bobby. And you think about that. And so maybe he's gonna come back and untie her. Maybe he's not. Either way, it's not gonna be good for her. And then we see Hank call Catherine because she's looking for her account ledger that, because she's got two ledgers. One that's the legit one that makes everything look like it's working the way it's supposed to, and one that, proves that she's, money laundering or whatever the fuck is going on. There's the shady ledger and the legit ledger. And so she's looking for the one, can't find it, and then she gets the call and says like, oh, I have what you're looking for. It's at the mill. Meet at this time. And it's Hank. We see that it's Hank. I don't know if she clocks that it's Hank, but she's like, all right, fine, I'll be there. She goes down there. Right around when she gets there is when whatever timer that's going to put everything up in flames goes off. Shelley's there tied up. Catherine's like, she sees that, there's a woman tied up, and she's like, I can't fucking hear you. You're all gagged up, and it's really funny. I don't know. The way that they pulled it off is really funny, because it's like a serious situation where for Shelley, this is life or death. And for Catherine's like, I might have got tricked on a business end. Let me think about this real quick. So it's like, it's two completely different stories going on and different magnitudes of the story. She does let Shelley go as everything's like starts to go up in flames. So Shelley escapes. Pete gets down there. He's like, oh my God, like Catherine's in there. That's my wife. Like, let me go. He goes in and tries to save her. And we don't see what happens to either of them as of when season 1 ends. But Shelly escapes. Fire department's there. Mill's up in flames. Hank, he's the one that called Catherine to get her down to the mill so she could, presumably burn to death. We don't know. So Hank ends up being the one to shoot Leo while Leo is trying to kill Bobby. So Bobby shows up at Leo and Shelly's house, trying to help her. She's obviously gone because she got kidnapped. Leo's there hiding behind the door and there to confront him and kill him, beat him up, whatever. And right when he's about to kill Bobby, he gets shot through the window, and Bobby looks through the window and sees Hank just kind of nod at him like, saved your life, and moves on. So presumably Leo is there to left to die, and Bobby's saved. Hank's the one that did it, and that that portion of the story is done. Now, Jacques has been told to meet the bank at this certain place over on the Washington side at a certain time. He shows up. Obviously, it's a sting operation. People show up to arrest him. He goes to pull a gun from someone, but who gets him is Andy. Andy pulls the gun from someone else and shoots him point blank. He's not dead, but he's incapacitated. So Andy's the hero, even though he was like in the beginning of the season, he was, the incompetent one, the goofy one, the silly one, all that stuff. And he ends up being like the hero of this episode. And which is great for him because he is, like I said earlier, has a thing for Lucy, the receptionist. But what I didn't say earlier is that at a certain point in the season, all of a sudden she starts acting differently towards him. Like they were all like, cutesy, but then she gets a call from a doctor and we don't hear the other end. And then all of a sudden she's treating Andy differently. Now, this is where we find out because she's like listening to the conversation, sees that like, oh, like he's a hero. And so they kind of have a conversation privately in the other room because, everyone else knows that they were like on again, off again or whatever. And they're like, yeah, you're a hero now. Go get her, Andy. And so they go talk. And this is where she reveals that she's pregnant. And he's in shock, which she's like not happy about. So she just like leaves the room, because that's not the reaction she was hoping for. So that, that concludes that portion. Now, while they're like, all right, hey, we did everything, Jacques arrested and he's in the hospital, I'm pretty sure we solved this, all that stuff. As they're leaving, Leland shows up and talking to Sheriff Truman, and he's like, is it true? Did you get the guy? And they're like, we got a suspect. That doesn't, mean anything or whatever. But Leland's acting super weird. It's like, oh, like they got the guy that killed my daughter, and basically through like overhearing different parts of the conversation can put together the fact that Jacques is at the hospital and that Dr. Hayward is not going to be there because he's going home for the night. So, this is basically where that part ends. And then the final scene we get of the season is Dale Cooper going back to his hotel room. He's still in the tux for his undercover disguise and everything. He's doing a tape recording to Diane, who we have not seen and will not see until the return. But he's always talking to like Diane. It's, he gives the time and gives like a description of what's going on. So he's like kind of giving a recap on everything that happened into the tape recorder. He's getting to his hotel room. He gets in there. He's getting undressed. There's a knock on the door. He opens the door and he gets shot. and we go to credits. So that's how season 1 ends. But yeah, it's only an 8-episode season. They obviously like weren't 100% sure how good it was gonna do. The whole thing aired between April and May. Just double check that. Yep. So yeah, pilot episode was April 8th, 1990. Episode 8, the finale, was May 23rd, 1990. So right after my first birthday. But it was it was enough to hook everyone in. An effective 8 episode, and it's crazy to be like, oh, it was a short season, and that's like the normal length of TV seasons now, which I think more than the streaming aspect of it and the big gaps between everything. The thing that drives me crazy is that the seasons are like only 8 episodes, and it's like, it's one thing to wait 2 years and then you get a 20-episode season, and we gotta wait 2 or more years for 8 episodes, and then they wonder why shows fall off, and I've heard all the excuses. I've heard that it's like, oh, the budget's so big and it's such a big scale. Bull fucking shit, because Game of Thrones was the most expensive series at the time, and they came out every year. It wasn't until like a little towards the end that there was a little bit of a bigger gap. But if they could do it, if Lost can do it, if Breaking Bad can do it, except for that last, season, then, what are you doing? But, that has nothing to do with Twin Peaks, because Twin Peaks was on schedule, and it was other shit that we'll get into on those episodes that screwed it over. It had nothing to do with the show itself, in my opinion. I mean, to an extent. We'll talk about that later. But yeah, that's Twin Peaks season 1. Like I said, that took the country by storm. I think took the world by storm. I think it got pretty big in Japan too. I just don't know too much about that aspect of it, but I know it was huge. But yeah, people loved it. It's one of the highest rated TV shows on IMDb. I believe it's sitting at an 8.7. Yep, 8.7 out of 10 right now on IMDb. And it's number 78 on the top 250 TV shows on IMDb. IMDb is not the end-all, be-all of quality of anything, but, it at least, if it's not showing quality, it shows popularity, I would say. But, yeah, I love this show so much. I can't wait to get more into the details and the lore and the story of it in season 2, because that's where it really takes off. That's where it really takes off, and where it hits rock bottom at the same time. So, and we'll get more into that. I think as of now, I'm gonna split it into 2 parts. There's the 1990 episodes and the 1991 episodes. But we'll see. If I'm going long on any section, then I'll split it more. But as of now, we'll do, 2 episodes for season 2. Before that, I'll get into Wild at Heart, because season 1 premiered. Then in the summer, Wild at Heart came out. And then in the fall, season 2 started. And season 2... had a little less involvement, at least in the first part, from David Lynch, because he was working on Wild at Heart. Now, once he was done with that and he came back, that's where it kind of picked back up, but it was also kind of dead in the water at that point. But like I said, we'll get more into that later. But yeah, I think that's about it for season 1. Nothing I can really think of that needs to be covered that I can't cover later. Because like I said, there's more substance to the rest of the show than there is in season 1, but season 1 is so vital for establishing everything. But great show. I hope you guys enjoyed this episode. I hope you continue to tune in to the rest of the David Lynch series. We're pretty much just getting started. But thank you guys for listening / watching, whichever one it is. Please remember to rate and review, like and subscribe, all that bullshit. But thank you guys. I appreciate any support that I get. Like, I really do. Like, I know I like to be kind of, blasé about it, but I really do appreciate like anyone that's consuming this or supporting it. So thank you guys. And please tune in next week. Thanks. Bye.